some of my most spiritual experiences, the most kind of enlightening moments have not been in the temple, have not been in sacrament meeting. One of them was in a Jewish history class. One of them was at a mosque. And when I think of those moments, it's not because it was new truth or something that the church doesn't have. It's things that were presented in a way that spoke to my spirit in a different way than the way my congregation does it. That doesn't mean that the way that Fast Sunday works isn't the way that some people in my congregation need to hear testimony. That is how they need to hear it, but that's not how I need to hear it. I need to hear it in a different space or in a different language.
Welcome back to That's Church. I'm Emily Call, here with my sister, Ashley Sanders. Today, we're talking with Dr. Jessica Spence Moss, Executive Director of the Interfaith Youth Alliance. She's a professor and a lifelong Latter-day Saint who's helping the next generation use faith as a moral compass for service, compassion, and social action. Jessica shares how interfaith work can actually deepen faith, what it means to serve without an agenda, and how discomfort can lead to genuine spiritual growth. Okay, before we jump in, a few really exciting updates from That's Church. Our next big event is on Friday, December 6th at 6 p.m. Doors open at 5:30. That event is called From Bias to Belonging, an interfaith call to compassion. In a time where everything feels so divided, we are really excited to hear from Rabbi Sam Spector from the Jewish community and Imam Shuaib Din from the Muslim community, who will share the same stage for a heartfelt conversation about unity and peacemaking. We will also have Casey McFarland. He is absolutely amazing, from the LDS Church, and Pastor Jamie White. We love her so much. It's an evening of hope, healing, and connection. We hope to see you there. Tickets are available now on our website at thatschurch.org. We've also got our book club coming up soon and a special Christmas Eve field trip where we will be visiting a local congregation together in the spirit of peace and reflection. All of the details are also on thatschurch.org, and then our Instagram account at That's Church Podcast. Now, let's dive in to this inspiring conversation with Dr. Jessica Moss.
We are just so impressed with you and all that you're doing, and your background and your qualifications are so impressive. Let's jump right in and tell us a little bit about the Interfaith Youth Alliance and what your vision and your mission is for that organization.
Yeah, so the Interfaith Youth Alliance started a little after 9/11, so early 2002, when a lot of interfaith in this country started, because we became aware of religious diversity at that point for some reason. And it originally was the Interfaith Youth Council of Orange County. And we worked over the next 20-ish years and changed it in 2020 to Interfaith Youth Alliance. It removes a little bit of geographical barriers. And I became the executive director in 2021. And our mission is to help youth use their faith as a moral compass for social action. When we use the word faith, though, it's a little broader than what a lot of people think of, because it also can be just the values and morals and cultures and spiritualities that motivate individual lives. And so when we talk about our kind of four main goals at Interfaith Youth Alliance, number one is to strengthen that faith. A lot of people, I know when I started doing interfaith work about 15 years ago, I got a lot of like, oh, you're going to leave your faith. You're going to like lose your faith. Be careful. This is dangerous. And I still think there's a little bit of that. And so when I'm presenting Interfaith Youth Alliance to religious leaders or to parents, I'm like, number one goal is that your kids are going to actually become more committed to their faith. Now, it might look different than what it has looked like in the past or what you think it should look like, but I guarantee you they will be better people and they will be more committed to faith and spirituality by participating in interfaith. Number two is to learn about the faith of others. And this one has also kind of expanded a little bit too, because Interfaith started and Interfaith Youth Alliance started because we want to learn about other faith communities. But I also think that interfaith helps us build relationships within our own faith communities and helps us understand people that live supposedly the same faith differently than us and start building an ability to have those conversations. The number 3 is leadership skills. So this year we have about 20 students on our leadership board. So they're the ones that plan what houses of worship we're going to visit. They're the ones that plan our themes for our annual projects and different things. And then lastly is service, because service is something that every religious community has something to say about. And it's the bare minimum way of connecting with people. If someone doesn't want to talk about theological differences, if someone doesn't want to enter a house of worship, they can and often want to collect food or pick up trash or go to a community service project. And that is where they can engage with other people. So that's kind of Interfaith Youth Alliance in a nutshell.
I think service is like a universal language. I think it's so great that that is such a focus because it can strengthen communities, it can strengthen individuals, it can build confidence in adults and in youth. I am writing, or I'm working on submitting an article for the Wayfarer magazine from Faith Matters. And so I've been thinking about that a lot today. And I've been thinking through kind of my faith journey, and part of that faith journey was stepping outside of my own faith and into this new world of interfaith and experiencing other people where I felt like there wasn't any pressure or any expectation of me. And maybe their expectation was lower than what I could give to them. If they kind of had this preconceived idea of what an LDS member is like. And so I found myself, I think I found like my own sovereignty as a woman and my own spirituality and connection to God. And then I was able to come back to my own faith and be like, oh, okay, these are the things that I really truly believe in, and I can strengthen those connections because I let myself reach outside first and discover what else there was out there, you know? So I think it's so valuable to teach that so early on. I think that is really beautiful that you're doing that. Tell us super briefly about the retreats that you're doing as well.
Yeah, so the retreat started in a collaborative way with the Shin Yuan Foundation, which is an organization with the Buddhist order of Shin Yuan. And it started out, we were invited, Interfaith Youth Alliance was invited to bring a few of our kids to an immersion program in New Mexico, along with some students from a Catholic high school and then other Shin Yuan students. And the first year I was able to go, which was 3 years ago now, it was an amazing experience. Every day we went and visited 2 or 3 houses of worship. In the evening, the students got to present about their own religious traditions. But I was sitting there thinking, like, I'm in Southern California, which is one of the most religiously diverse places in the country, if not the world. And we could totally do this in Southern California. So I came home and I asked my board, like, what do you all think about this idea? And they were like, that seems really big. And I was like, if I can get the funding and figure out all the logistics, will you support me? And they're like, oh, sure. And I think some of them were kind of like, it's not going to happen.
We'll see.
Oh, it happened. So the first year, last year, we had 14 students. We dormed at Cal State Fullerton for 6 days and visited 13 houses of worship and did a service project, a food distribution with a local organization called Giving Children Hope. And then this last year, we had about 12 students and we visited 16 houses of worship and did 2 service projects. It is not a 6 days for those with like weak, with bad sleeping schedules, and you go. We wake up at 7.
Yeah. It's
we don't
intense.
get home until
Not
10.
for the faint-hearted.
And we are in it.
Wow.
And it's amazing. Like, and the thing that I think is so powerful about these weeks, that's a little different than the New Mexico trip. The New Mexico trip is awesome, but really everybody that goes, like no one there, none of the youth are from New Mexico. They're all coming from all over the country. We have students from Hawaii, the East Coast, Southern California, the Pacific Northwest. And they go to New Mexico and they really are tourists in New Mexico. They are, but instead of seeing like, I don't know what people go, Meow Wolf or whatever, they're going to houses of worship. Like that is their tourism. And it's great. But as we've all experienced as tourists, we like go really quick to all of the places. We take a bunch of pictures and then we go home and then we just sit back and reminisce. Whereas when you're doing it in your own community where you're going to a house of worship that you've maybe driven past 20 times and never even knew what it was, or drove past it and you are always like, I wish I could go in there, but I feel uncomfortable and I don't know. And like, I don't know how to do it. We are supplying those experiences. And now those students, if they want to go back a week later, they totally can. If in New Mexico, you can't go back to New Mexico a week later unless your parents are willing to buy you a plane ticket. But when it's your own backyard, you can go back whenever you want. And when the other dream I have that I don't think is too unrealistic is that these kids are going to go to high school. And if someone says, hey, in passing, someone mentions like, oh, I go to the Jane Center. One of my students can say, I've been to the Jane Center. And then it's going to be like, you have? Like, why would you ever go to the Jane Center? You're not Jane. And then they already have like a place of connection that is deeper than like sports or music or something. It's like something that really motivates every aspect of your identity. And now you have a connection with that person. So I think there is power in doing these immersion trips in your own community, being immersed in the space that you live in a different way than you've been immersed before.
And I love so much that you do it with the youth because it's just so important to start there where they're just more open-minded, like they're just more moldable and those things they'll just grow up with those precious parts of them. Whereas I think adults sometimes can be hard-headed and a little more stubborn. And kind of like you mentioned, they have a very like, you said something about faith being more broad. And I love that because I think the older we get, sometimes we make faith a little more boxed in, like this is my faith. Whereas kids have this open imagination of like what everything can be. So you teach them about religions and all of the different facets of those churches, and it just opens their mind, to their own religion, to different religions. I know Emmy and I visiting churches around us, like my mind has been opened and I had no idea about how many communities were around me until now. And I'm 33 years old. It's like, where have I been? Like I've seen some of these churches, but you just have no idea how many there are around you until you start exploring.
Yeah.
We see them now.
Yeah.
Now, anytime my kids, anytime we pass them, they're like, Mom, look, which I love. I love that they're more aware than I ever was, at that age or until now, So I think there's an important distinction as well. A lot of times when people think, oh, my kids are going to be more aware of the other kids at school because they've been in their place of worship or whatever. So they'll have an opportunity to proselyte to them or to share their testimony with them or things like that. So you talk about that in an article that you wrote. So explain the difference between interfaith and proselyting. I think this is very important.
Yeah, this is the thing that I wish I could speak at General Conference on this topic, honestly, but I don't actually want to ever speak at General Conference. But
you do great.
If there was some way that I could get this out to everyone, I'm going to take this in a slightly different direction and you can do with it what you will. So great. One of the things that has really weighed on me really since almost the beginning of my interfaith journey is D&C Section 4. So I served a mission in Colorado, and in my mission, we were required to memorize and recite D&C 4 every morning. And so in my mind, D&C 4, we are called to serve, and that equates to baptize people. And if you are called to the work and if you are faithful, then you will get people wet. And I started doing, I don't even remember what it was that made me like think about DNC4, but I'm like, I'm going to read that one more time. And if you go back, like I challenge you all, the readers, everyone, go back and read section DNC4.
Because
Nothing
we all
about
did
DNC.
it. Yeah, we all did it. And it was so focused on our
Yeah.
missions. Yeah. So I'm excited to now. I haven't.
Nothing in DNC4 except like if you create the analogy of the wheat and when you thrust in the sickle.
Mm-hmm.
But nowhere in DNC4 is another human talked about. It's all you. You are called to the work. And I know, Emily, you have a child going out on a mission. So this is what I've told all of my nephews when they go on their missions. I constantly remind them, you are called to serve, period. That is it. You are called to serve. That is it. And if we see interfaith work as a way in which that we are living out our faith and we are serving God's children, there's no space for this proselytizing, like, I'm only going to serve if it means that I get to give them a Book of Mormon, or if it means that they get to come to church with me, or if it means that they're going to eventually get baptized. Alan, my husband, he rolls his eyes at me because like in General Conference, we hear a lot of talks of service and how great it is. Like this woman befriended her neighbor and brought her pie every week for 30 years. And then she got baptized. And
there's always an and then.
And it always ends that way. And I'm like, no, because we're not called to that second part. We are called to serve, period. And I wish there were more talks that were like, and these people became amazing friends and they learned from each other and and one of them was at the other one's funeral and someday they'll meet in the eternities and everything will be beautiful. Like, and who knows what that eternity looks like. But, so that's one thing. Also, something that I struggle with in interfaith spaces when we do have LDS participation. Often I don't tell people that I'm Mormon when I enter interfaith spaces because we do have a certain reputation. And there's a lot of people that don't really get the subtext of some of the things that Mormons will say or do. And I do recognize it. And so I'm constantly on like high alert. Like, okay, that other LDS person said that thing in that interfaith gathering. Like, what did they really mean by that? Because I think I know what they mean. Everyone else thinks they're just being a nice person, but I think.
Right.
And so I think it takes a lot of effort to overcome that socialization. Like, cause we're taught like when we're in primary, when we're in young men's, young women's, we're taught like, be nice to your friends and invite them to mutual, be nice to your friends, tell them about what you did before school, talk about seminary. Well, in Southern California, seminaries in the morning. I know Utah, you get to do it in the middle of the day, but,
usually.
Yeah. So, I think there's a lot of effort to overcome that and then portion of the story and to just, I am called to serve. That's it. I'm called to love. That's it. Yeah.
I could not love that more. Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me, I'll just share this quickly, but we had a Baptist pastor, I'm trying to remember his title, Baptist pastor on, and he was from the South, and we learned so much from him. But something I'll never forget him saying, because we were asking him questions and he kept asking us questions, and he was like amazed that we felt differently about some of the LDS teachings. And he even said, I didn't know that Mormons could feel this way. He's like, I thought that you all did XYZ. And it was cool to see him learn something about us, even though we were here trying to learn about him. And I think, in one religion, there can be 100,000 different ways of worship, like It's like we're living our own religion, really.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I appreciate, like, if you talk to Jewish people, they'll often say, like, if you have 3 Jews in the room, there's 4 opinions. And I use that often because I wish other traditions, like, that is the reality. If you have 3 Mormons in a room, you're going to have 4 opinions. If you have 3 Catholics, 4 opinions,
Yeah.
3 Muslims, 4 opinions. But we don't verbalize that. We don't own it. And I wish more communities owned it, because we're all individual humans with individual experiences and, agency, that thing that we care so much about. So why wouldn't there be a diverse way of living out our tradition? And to your point, like, I'll tell people when it comes out, like, oh yes, I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or I've become more confident in saying I'm a nuanced Mormon. And the people that are like, wait, what? And I'm like, if you meet 10 other Mormons, don't expect any of them to believe or say the same things that I'm believing or saying right now. And I'm okay with that. They might not be, but I am.
Yeah. I think through my faith journey and kind of deconstructing, I've looked for those other LDS people too that are in the exact same spot that I am, and there just aren't. Like, we're all in a different place, whether you're very conservative and orthodox or you're a little more nuanced and or liberal or whatever. You're never in exactly the same place, which is beautiful. We're all
Yeah.
human and individual. I could not love more that you said you are called to serve, period. My son is leaving, so he's doing at home MTC right now, and he leaves for the Provo MTC next Wednesday. And I can't wait to share that with him. I think that's really important. And we've talked so much about not losing himself and, focusing on the people and loving them and spirit of the law versus the letter of the law and like all of those things. But I love the simplification of that for all of us, not just missionaries, of course, but for all of us. You were called to serve, period. And as you were talking, I was thinking of all of our friends, all of our interfaith friends that we've met, and those relationships and friendships have been so valuable. And I would hate to think that they would ever think that we had any ulterior motives other than being friends with them and gaining a relationship and thinking of like, and they grew old together and one went to the funeral of the other. Like, I think, oh, I hope that happens, like I hope that these beautiful relationships that we've forged through this work, I hope that happens because they are valuable to me. And we just can learn so much from each other just by loving each other and learning about each other. I mentioned the article that you wrote, and I read it about a year ago. And so I'm really excited to delve back into it and hear about it from you. I think it is so wise and there's so much knowledge packed in there. And it's really so great to see something. And I think a lot of times we think we know our own religion. Well, this is the way it is. But a lot of that is culture. A lot of what we think is our religion or our gospel is surrounded by the society that we live in and the culture that we live in. But you go back to Joseph Smith and the things that he said about interfaith and the things that he said about the gospel and the religion that we practice. And I love the things that you pulled out in there. So I'm excited to hear about it. It's called An Invitation to Interfaith Engagement, a Mormon Perspective. So just kind of give us an overview and tell us kind of what you hope people take away from it.
Yeah, so I'm going to be honest. I am constantly on a journey. So when I wrote this, I was actually really pissed off. Like, I was just mad.
Okay.
And as I reread it, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm like super judgmental in this article. I'm not a nice person. There is still there's good things in there. And I tried to soften at the end where I was like, I need to appreciate the community that I come from. But basically, in a nutshell, I'm critiquing Mormon culture, not doctrine, not theology. I love Mormon doctrine and Mormon theology. But basically it boils down to, if the LDS culture, if Mormons could eradicate some of their ignorance of religious others, get over their complacency, because we are such a when I say we, like the institution of the church is such a well-oiled machine that it creates complacency. Like, a lot of people will be like, oh, look at the Mormons. They're educated and they push their kids to do all of these things. But yeah, externally, sure, I think we are a very busy people. But when it comes to interfaith, we're very complacent. When it comes to religious knowledge, we're very complacent. We're just like, we got it. Why do we need to work any harder? And then finally, the exclusivity piece. We are, like, we hear it every first Sunday of the month. I know that this is the one true church. That language. And even if we kind of try to parse it out and, oh, well, that in practicality, that means that Joseph restored the church or whatever. Like, at the end of the day, people, because of their complacency, because of their ignorance, they just become exclusive. We're like, I don't need to work any harder. I have all of the truth. There's no more need for truth. I don't remember if I put it in this article or not, but a Bible, we have a Bible. Why do we need another Bible? If we just replace Bible with truth, we have the truth. Why do we need more truth? And I think that becomes the kind of MO of a lot of members of the church. So with all of that angst that I brought into the article, I don't think it's the end. I don't think that it's something that we can't fix. I think we have, like, the quotes from Joseph Smith, but also I started the article with Gordon B. Hinckley, who again was making these arguments or invitations to be more friendly and be protective and be supportive of religious others, specifically members of the Muslim community post 9/11. And then even today, President Nelson, like, I do think that there's a genuine desire from leadership to engage in interfaith in honest and trust-filled ways. But how that comes down to individual members is not conducive to the interfaith ethic. And so taking the time to, like, learn about religious others, asking questions, just as much as we say, oh, when your coworker asks you what you did this weekend, tell them you went to church. Well, flip that around. Ask your coworker what they did this weekend. And when they say they went to their Shabbat service, or they went to Juma prayer, or they went to mass, ask them about it. Ask them what that experience is like. Not so that you can start talking more about yourself, but so that you can understand them more. And the getting over the complacency of this isn't necessarily interfaith, but it goes back to the service point. I think we have a lot of complacency in the good work that the church does. You watch General Conference, the 2-hour break in the middle, and they do all the humanitarian and stories about all of the good stuff that we do. And I think it creates this complacency, like, oh, I paid my 10%. My money went to that thing. Good on me. I don't have to do anything else. But yet, when you have, like, in my congregation, for example, we have a few neighbors that are houseless, and they come to our building at times. And I don't think they've been at our building a single time where I haven't heard another member of the congregation make some disparaging remark about them. And I think, but you do pay your tithing and your fast offerings so that the church could donate funds to a shelter or to a food pantry. But when your neighbor is standing right next to you, you don't see them as a child of God. Like, that's a problem. Yeah. And then the exclusivity piece, like, this idea that we have all of the truth. well, we might have a lot of truth, but that doesn't mean that that truth doesn't exist other places, or that the way the truth is explained in other spaces isn't more conducive to our spirits. And that's the thing that I have really gained. Like I've talked about this in other spaces. Like some of my most spiritual experiences, the most kind of enlightening moments have not been in the temple, have not been in sacrament meeting. One of them was in a Jewish history class. One of them was at a mosque. And when I think of those moments, it's not because it was new truth or something that the church doesn't have. It's things that were presented in a way that spoke to my spirit in a different way and in a better way than the way my congregation does it. That doesn't mean that the way that Fast Sunday works isn't the way that some people in my congregation need to hear testimony. That is how they need to hear it, but that's not how I need to hear it. I need to hear it in a different space or in a different language. And so that's that shift that it takes work. So when people say like, oh, I just don't feel the spirit on Sundays, that's legitimate. Maybe you don't. Maybe you do need to go stare at a tree instead. Or maybe you need to go to Juma prayer and be in a more embodied form of worship where you actually like kneel down, bow down, stand up.
I love that you use the word complacency, because I've always felt like there's not one evil person heading anything, really. Like, I mean, some things, but especially like within your wards, within your, like Emmy said, you can disagree with people, but I've never felt like, oh, they're just with their evil plan, but I do have a hard time with people who are so stagnant that they don't want to learn anymore. Like, and as a Libra, I love everyone, but those are the people I have the hardest time with, mostly because I feel bad that they're missing out. I think like there's so much you could gain by opening your mind up even a little bit. And I think, like you said, it's so important to even just like, it can be like little things, it doesn't have to be visiting other religions, but it can be making a comment in class. A woman, an older woman, which I'm saying she's older because sometimes I think we can put older people in this category of like they're more stagnant, which is just not true. There's a 20-year-old.
Just kidding.
Hey.
I'm just kidding. Go on.
There's an older. No, she was like an elderly woman, and I can sometimes think like maybe they're more stagnant, but it's just not true. There can be a 20-year-old that's just as like mentally closed off to ideas, but she made a comment about visiting other religions, and I was like, yes, girl. Yes, like in Relief Society. And I was like, those comments open the floor up to other people being able to share their experiences. We can sometimes feel like we're alone in that, but it just takes one comment to be like, hey, I've also visited a mosque, or I've also been to a synagogue. And so it can start with little things like that too.
Yeah. And I think it's important, like for those of us that are trying to find the nuance, are deconstructing, reconstructing, it's hard some Sundays to go to Relief Society or Sunday school, right? Like, cause you're like, I don't want to, especially if you know who the teacher is and you know where they stand on certain things, and you're like, I don't want to sit in that lesson. But my husband and I have also had this conversation quite a few times. Like, if I'm confident enough in where I am, like my relationship with God, my belief system, whatever they're going to say, if I agree with it or not, is not going to impact that part of me. But if they do say something that is problematic, is exclusive, is complacent, is ignorant, someone needs to be there to call them out. And if I'm not there, who's going to do it? Like who's going to do it? Not that I'm the only person that can do it. Like other people can.
Right.
But also on the flip side, every one of us is learning. And there are times where someone will say something that I'm like, whoa, like I totally would never have thought that you thought that. And now I have more compassion for you because like I see your effort in learning, and you have also taught me something in the process. Just a couple of weeks ago, I don't remember the lesson from DNC, but it's called like the olive leaf, I think is like the colloquial name for the section. And there was a quote on the board that the teacher put up, and it was about how like the olive branch or the olive leaf represents resilience, and it represents hope and peace. And I often wear my kufiya in support of Palestine on Sundays. And when I first started wearing it, people would be like, "Oh, that's such a pretty scarf." And I'm like, "It's called a kufiya." And yes, it is pretty, but it holds a significance. And the border represents olive leaves for the orchards, and the inside is netting representing the connection to the sea and the work that is done right there by Gaza. And so he had this on the board, and so I raised my hand because he made this comment like, "I've never even seen an olive leaf." And I was like, "Well, you have, because they're all over our city, but okay." And so I raised my hand, and I was like, I think it's a really powerful statement that you put on the board, because for me, I wear this kufiya that has olive leaves on it. And what you say about this quote about it representing resilience and hope and peace, that's what it represents for the Palestinian people. There were some people in that room that I think like, oh, maybe they learned something.
Mm-hmm.
And there we go.
Absolutely. You don't know what you don't know until someone tells you.
Yeah.
Or you figure, you find the answer
Yeah.
that you didn't know you were looking for. So I love that. I think I have had moments like that in my church as well, where I'm like, I am completely alone in this. And then come to find and thinking, they say, well, people will come out of the woodwork. Well, they're not. And then like a year later, I'm like, oh, where were you? But I think a lot of times people just are uncomfortable sharing, but they're internalizing and they're hearing you. And so it's important to know that we're never alone. There's got to be somebody that can relate in some way, or that took something from it, and maybe they'll come back to it years later.
Yeah.
Or they're just not quite sure what to do with it yet. They internalized it, but they're not quite sure how to handle it. I wanted to go back to also when we're reaching outside of ourselves. And I think sometimes when we approach somebody of another religion, you mentioned like talking to someone and not talking to them so that we can share something, but talking to them so we can listen. And I think it's important to recognize that we're not going to be converted instantly, that there's not a need to be afraid of learning something new. It's not betraying your own religion in any sort of way. It's only expanding it. And within our gospel, we talk in our articles of faith about gaining every truth and reaching outside of ourselves and reaching for truth. And you mentioned the idea that Joseph Smith said, embracing every truth.
Yeah.
So what does that mean for you in interfaith?
Yeah. So there's another part in the article, because I reread it so I could remember things.
Great.
And there was a BYU, it was like religious freedom. It was through the law school, and they brought in Dr. Ala Murabit, and she made this comment about religious freedom, and that religious freedom is the ability to hold our own faith, our own truth up to what it claims to be. Like I'm mixing up her words a little bit, but you get the gist. Like it's the importance is saying, okay, this is our ideal and we're not living up to it. And religious freedom is the freedom to call out when we're not living up to that faith, when we're not living up to that truth. And so for me, looking for every truth is looking for those spaces in which other people are living truth better than I am. Those spaces in which people are living their own faith in a way that I can recognize as truth. As I was rereading it, I was reminded there's a hadith in Islam, you have the Quran, and then there's these extra words that are written by people that were with the Prophet Muhammad and like relating kind of, so they're not Quranic, but they're still considered important sacred stories. And there's this one that talks about if you see an injustice, your first responsibility is to use your hands to stop that injustice. Your second, if you can't use your hands, then you use your words. You write letters, you speak out, you protest. And if you can't do that, then you at the very least can pray. And it even says in the Hadith that the prayer is the lowest form of faith.
Wow.
And and if we have Muslim listeners, please correct me if any of things that I just said are incorrect, or I'm interpreting them differently. But for me, that is a truth that we as members of the church should use our hands first and foremost. If we see an injustice, we should be on the front lines, and we are on the front lines. So we always, again, we promote it like, oh, look at the humanitarian aid. They tell that funny story about Katrina, like, oh, there was the Mormons and then there was the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Like, okay, yes, when it comes to humanitarian aid, we're on the front line, but when there's injustice, are we on the front line? That's a truth that I think we could live up to a little bit better. Yeah, so that's like just one thought that's popping into my mind.
I love that. Yeah.
I've mentioned the article of faith many times on the podcast, but I've never read it, and I've never even said which article of faith. So I looked it up really quickly, and it's the 13th article of faith, and it says, if there is anything virtuous, lovely, or of good report, or praiseworthy, we seek after these things. Is that not what we're doing exactly within Interfaith? We're just seeking after those things. And I think you're exactly correct that that is happening in our leadership, but for some reason it's not trickling down all the way. And I think also acknowledging and validating and trusting that people outside of our own faith tradition are having spiritual experiences is really important. You guys actually posted a story recently, and I stole it and shared it as well on Instagram. But it says many young people have experienced a sacred moment regardless of their religious identity. And they must have done a survey. And
yeah, it's Springtide Research.
Okay, there we go. Thank you. Oh yeah, there it is. Okay, so LDS 67% said that, and I think that number would be lower or higher for other people, except we focus on that a lot. We talk about, okay, did you feel the Spirit? Did you have a spiritual experience? I think that's a big focus. I think if that was more maybe talked about more in other religions, or talked about ours and less, these numbers might be even more equal, or different. But Protestant, 65%, Muslim, 64%, just Christian, 63%, Buddhist, 62%, something else, 61%, Orthodox, such as Greek or Russian Orthodox, 60%, Roman Catholic, 58%. Like these people, these young people are having spiritual experiences. And I think sometimes we get it within our culture or bubble or whatever, we think, oh, we just have spiritual experiences. If you do this, you'll know we're true and we're correct. But I think we need to acknowledge that they might also be correct. And maybe it's correct for them. And maybe it would be correct for you at some point in your life. Maybe you're seeking for a spiritual home, and this feels more correct for you right now. And then something different feels more correct for you later. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility for truth to be huge. I don't think truth is this one thing, that we possess and we're special and we're better. I think truth has to be, there's a universe full of truth, so we're just barely tapping into some truth, and let's include as much of it as we possibly can. Okay, so just quickly, tell us what excites you about the future in your interfaith work, and just maybe some things that are up and coming.
So what excites me is just in general, the youth, like the willingness that they have. When I was looking over the questions, I do a lot of word association, and I do a lot like, okay, what's the first thing that pops into your mind? Okay, that intuition, that's where we're going. So the first thing that I wrote down is discomfort. And that's like sounds counterintuitive. But I think one of the things that is required in interfaith work, but just required in living in a diverse society, is we have to get more comfortable with being uncomfortable. It's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to name that we're uncomfortable. That's something else. Like, I think we're so concerned about how we're presenting ourselves and how we're seen, that we're afraid of being uncomfortable, and we're afraid of making mistakes, and we're afraid of saying the wrong thing. But the youth that, at least the youth that I work with, and my husband, again, I bring him up a lot because he's my sounding board. He's like, it's so interesting that you work with youth, because like, you don't really like youth. And I'm like, no, but these are special youth. These are like, this is like the top 0.05% of youth that I get to work with. It's like a huge blessing.
That's
but
awesome.
The ones that I get to work with, they have no, I'm not going to say they have no problem, but they are okay with saying like, that didn't feel right. Like, I don't know why, but that made me uncomfortable. And then we get to have a conversation. Like, why did that make you uncomfortable? Let's talk about it. Is it because you're unsafe? You're not unsafe because you're with me, and I'm not going to ever take you someplace intentionally that makes you unsafe. But is it that there's something going on culturally? Is it something that you've been taught that needs some kind of explanation? So like some of the examples, like, we went to a synagogue a while ago, and one of the students that I work with was not wanting to go because she, for political reasons, cultural reasons, she just was like, I'm not going to enter that space. I do not want to go into that space. And we had a conversation, and we talked about why she was uncomfortable. We talked about all of the different ways in which we could kind of utilize that experience to gain more understanding, gain more knowledge, to build bridges. And she went, and she was uncomfortable, but she went. And that is the thing that I think is really inspiring to me, because the adults aren't going. The adults aren't showing up. The adults, like Interfaith right now, is struggling hardcore because I mentioned a little bit with the kufiyah, but what's going on in the Middle East right now, in Palestine, in Israel, has created a huge rift in interfaith spaces. And the challenge has always been there. The challenge has been there since 1948. But there's been other things that kind of have been able to distract us. We had the Cold War, we had 9/11, we had the current presidency. We had things to distract us and to build solidarity and community with religious others. And we don't have those things anymore. We're far removed from those things. And so now we're left with the discomfort of, what does this conflict, this genocide in Palestine and Israel, what does that mean for our communities here in the United States of America? What does that mean for how we engage in interfaith relationships? The students are showing up. The adults aren't, by and large. They've gone to their corners. They, similar to Ashley, what you said earlier, like they're stuck in their ways, and it's really hard to move. The youth, I mean, we see on college campuses, they are politically active, but there's like this level of willingness. There's this level of desire to, they see the writing on the wall. They don't want our world to implode. So what are we going to do about it? And so they show up. And they ask questions, and they name that they're uncomfortable. Whereas again, the adults, they don't want to let people know that they're uncomfortable. They don't want to let people know that they're ignorant. So they either just don't show up, or they show up with this facade of, I know all there is to know about this tradition, and I'm just here because I'm a good person. And they're not humble enough to say, like, oh, I didn't know that you believed that, or I didn't know that that was something that you practiced. Um, but the youth are. And I have a lot of hope in that is what's going to save us
They're coming
without putting too much
forward
pressure
and
on their backs, because
Yeah.
that is also like,
right.
fix all of our problems for us, youngsters.
Yeah. Right.
I love that you mentioned that they can be uncomfortable, because you're right. We don't talk about that enough. And I think, I mean, Emmy and I, even on here, we talk about all the highlights, but there's definitely been some uncomfortable moments. And it hasn't stopped us. But I do think it's important to push through those discomfort, because I think, like, something you mentioned earlier, Jessica, was language, like spiritual language. And I think a lot of that can make people uncomfortable. But we need to remember that we have our own weird spiritual language. Like, my mom used to yell out the car window, "Listen to the Holy Ghost," when we would walk into school. And I'm like, my friends that aren't LDS are like, what ghost is talking to you in the day, like during your school day? Like, but to me, it was normal, like once we see that we're really all praying the same, we're all doing very similar things, it's just named something different. It's just called something different or worn differently, like you mentioned, garments versus hijabs versus, there's so many beautiful things that seem weird to us when what we're doing is also weird to someone else.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
For
and
sure.
I think it's important, like, I think the benefit of like the post 9/11 interfaith movement was very much like building on those commonalities. Like, oh, you pray by kneeling and prostrating. Oh, you pray by sitting and folding your hands or putting your hands together. But we're all praying. Or like, you have the Quran, we have the Bible, you have the Torah. Like, we worked so hard on like, okay, what are the things, like, how can we create those equitable experiences and recognize them? But there are a lot of differences, and that's the thing that I think that's like the next step of interfaith. In order, if we want interfaith to actually be a positive force for change in the future, like, it has to be a space in which we say, okay, yeah, we pray the same. Or like, I'm constantly having to remind members of the church, Allah is just God in Arabic. If you opened up a Bible that was written in Arabic, you would see Allah, because it's the same God. And that's important. But we also have to have a conversation about Jesus is different in Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. We have to have a conversation about, I've recently been to a couple of Hindu spaces, and their shift, I feel like it's a shift to kind of become more accepted in Christian spaces. So they shift the way that they talk about Hanuman and Ganesh and Krishna, to be kind of like, oh, we're going to equate it to God and Jesus and like this one deity. And in some ways that's great, because it makes Christians like more comfortable. But also, I go back to, it's okay to be uncomfortable, and it's okay to learn what the actual theology is. And that's important, because we're all individuals, and God has spoken to all of us in different ways. And to your point, Emily, like, truth is not this little finite box. Truth is ever expansive. It's everywhere. And sometimes it's uncomfortable, and that's okay.
Yeah. And I shouldn't have even simplified it to the universe. That's just in my mind.
The biggest thing we
It's
can
ever
think of, right?
expansive. It's
Yeah.
infinite. It's for sure. I think too, I really love learning spiritual language, like different spiritual language, because it's almost like learning a new language that we don't have words for. And it's so beautiful to like internalize that and take that into our own practice, or just into our heart, however that looks, but also to learn a different spiritual language that we do have a word for, and then use it differently, because I think that helps us to stop. And we have these rote words, or words that we just get used to, ways of doing things we just get used to, and it just becomes practice. And then the feeling kind of is drawn out of it, and we can no longer feel the words because we're just saying them over and over again, you know. But as soon as we learn new spiritual words from somebody that does things differently, it can expand our connection to God. It can expand our spirituality and our knowledge about ourselves and our souls, you know, and really help us see ourselves for who we are. I think also this is such a simple principle, but it's something I think that we lose sight of. You talk about like being uncomfortable. It is hard to be uncomfortable, but it is so important. We tell our kids this, like, well, there's right and wrong, and there's, you know, you're gonna struggle so that you can find joy sometimes. And we forget that. I'm sending you mentioned it, Jessica, but I'm sending my son out on a mission. And it is so painful for me. It's way harder than I ever expected, because I love him so much. And he's so great right now. He's so fun to be around. And he's like his best self right now. Like all that work we put into him, is like worth it, you know, because he's become this amazing adult child man. Man-child, I guess. And so I'm just like so devastated to let him go, but I'm also so excited for the struggles he's going to have so that he can become stronger. And I was talking to my sister-in-law that has sent a couple missionaries out, and she said, let me send you this song and just remember that this is what we want for them. And it's called I Wish You Pain. And it says, I wish you pain, and I wish you doubts roaring in like monsters, lonely hopelessness, fear that's venomous, pushing yourself so hard, putting yourself on the line with everyone watching, broken promises and coldness, heart shattered more deeply than you could ever know, arriving somewhere only to find you're still nowhere close to where you hope to be, crying uncontrollably, life trapping you, needing help that never arrives. Like all of those things, it's like there's so many things that we kind of have to go through to be able to refine ourselves and to become what we want to become, whether it's more like Christ or connect with Allah or make connections with other people or our own spirituality. Like all of those things have to happen. And so why not put ourselves in those situations, not within the confines of the way that we've learned them, but put ourselves in situations that are different so that we can be refined more.
And it builds, like with that song, like it builds a lot of empathy, right? And I think that is something that's missing in a lot of spaces. We see a lot of sympathy. Oh, that sucks for them. But we don't see the empathy, the like ways in which that child, like, I mean, I could talk about everything's political in my perspective. So like gun violence, like we don't see necessarily how that mass shooting impacts me, impacts my kids, impacts the way that I say bye to them every morning when I drop them off at school. And we shouldn't have to go through all of that pain in order to have empathy. We should see it and see if it has impacted one person, that's one person too many. And we should be utilizing our faith as a moral compass for social action and do something about it. And I think that that's something that as a missionary, if you do remember DNC 4, that you are called to serve, period, then that you learn that because you observe the pain of others and you feel that pain because you love them so much. And it should change the way that you engage with people. Like it should change the way that you see the communities that you're serving, and the way that you want to help them, not as like a white savior complex, not as like, I'm going to bring, like, if you just do X, Y, and Z and pay your tithing, everything will be fixed. But like as a human being, as a child of God, we are here to love each other and serve each other and remind each other that we are all of value and of worth, and we're all going to experience pain in different ways, but we have each other to also try to alleviate that pain.
Which just like reminds me, it always comes back to love. If you learn to love people, then you can have compassion. If you learn to love people, you can grow yourself. If you learn to love people that are different than you, so definitely. So share with us now how people can get involved in what you're doing in California. Southern California, where exactly are you, and how can people get involved? Do you have a website, maybe your social media information, and where can they learn more about your efforts and your organization?
Yes. So we do have a website. It's very minimal. We do most of our stuff on Instagram. So
Okay.
our website is joiniya.org. Our Instagram is Interfaith Youth Alliance. And we are in Orange County mostly, but we have a student that comes to us from the South Bay, which is like Long Beach, LA area. And so this year is our first year that we're actually starting to do programming in that area. And we're also trying to start a chapter in Northern California with a few students that I've worked with in the past. So really, it's like a grassroots method of if students and if there's a handful of adults that think that this is important, they can reach out to me through the website or on Instagram, and I will do whatever I can to help people have these conversations. And get this going. So what we do on like our normal monthly basis is we visit a house of worship every month, and we do service projects, usually once in the fall and once in the spring. And we have a larger event in the spring called the Faith Forum, which is kind of the best of. It's like our outreach. So we try to get about 150 to 200 students that haven't done interfaith before to come in and have conversations and learn about what it is. But yeah,
Wow.
we're here. We're willing to work with anyone, do anything that we need to do to get the work out. I'm willing to proselytize interfaith all day long.
Yes, love it.
This is the right thing to proselytize. This is awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for all
So
of this
great.
info, and you've been so inspirational. It's like, it's re-energizing me. I'm like, I'm ready to get back out there.
Yep, me too. And it's Interfaith Youth Alliance on Instagram. Your website is called what?
It's join, so JOINIYA, interfaithyouthAlliance.org.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This is amazing. We're doing it, guys. We're going to get out there and do more.
Yay!
Connecting, interfaith.
Yes.
This is awesome. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Jessica.
What an incredible conversation with Jessica Moss. Her reminder that we're called to serve, period, captures so much of what Interfaith Connection is about. Showing up with love, humility, and courage to learn from one another. If you'd like to follow Jessica's work, visit joiniya.org or find Interfaith Youth Alliance on Instagram. And don't miss what's coming up on That's Church, From Bias to Belonging, our next event, Friday, December 6th at 6 p.m. At the Compass Gallery. Our next book club is coming up, and our Christmas Eve field trip. You can find all of the details and information at that'schurch.org or on Instagram at That's Church Podcast. Thanks so much for listening to That's Church and for being a part of this growing circle of love, faith, and shared humanity.